Madam Deputy Speaker, and I know there are many members who wish to get in to speak, so I will try to keep my remarks as briefly as possible. Can I say, first of all, that I'm delighted and honoured to be a supporter of this bill, and I want to congratulate the Honourable Member for Stockton South on taking this subject as the matter for this private member's bill and on bringing this matter before the House in the way that he did. I well remember that when I got a relatively high place in the ballot a number of years ago, I introduced a private member's bill for a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. Whilst I did get half an hour in this House to deliver this speech, thanks in no small way to the kind cooperation of the Honourable Member for Christchurch, who often attends on Fridays on private members' bills, unfortunately there wasn't as much interest in the bill, and there certainly weren't as many members present to ensure that it got any further. But I'm proud of having introduced that private member's bill, and I congratulate the Honourable Member and indeed the Prime Minister for his support for this initiative. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is 38 years, as Honourable and Right Honourable Members have mentioned, since we have had a referendum on the UK's relationship with Europe, and it is time now to give people their say. And so therefore, as a party that does believe in consulting the people and has advocated referendums on a number of occasions in Northern Ireland, on a range of constitutional issues, and has supported that consistently, particularly in relation to the issue of Europe, we will be voting in favour of this bill enthusiastically and without any equivocation. And I know that in so doing we represent the vast majority of the people of Northern Ireland, even those people who would support parties, not our own party, but parties who are in favour of being a part of the European Union, because people, whether they're for or against the European Union, for or against the United Kingdom's continued membership on whatever terms, they believe it is high time that they had a say in this debate, and that it wasn't confined simply to this chamber and to television studios or whatever. And if we can have referendums on regional assemblies, devolved government, police commissioners, local mayors, AV, why on earth is it logical or sensible or defensible for any member of this House or any party to take a position that on this issue, as the Honourable Member for Aldridge Brownhill so eloquently said in his speech, and others have said as well, an issue of such fundamental importance to the democracy of the United Kingdom, that on this issue the British people will uniquely be denied their say. And I think that we have now reached a point in our political debate and in the nation's history where I think that that position is simply untenable. And I have no doubt, as the Honourable Member from Glasgow who spoke earlier said, I have no doubt that we will soon see a change in the stated positions of the other parties in this House. We know where the Conservatives stand now. I will give away in a minute. I believe that the Liberal Democrats, their leader, has conceded that this is now inevitable, and having been in favour of an in-out referendum, their current position is simply untenable. And the Labour Party too, who are already debating how they get themselves off this hook of where they now stand. I believe they too will come to the position that they will support a referendum because the vast majority of their supporters want a referendum. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and thank him and his party for the support for this important bill. But does he agree with me, as we've heard, the rising dissatisfaction across Europe with the European Union? If this House were to vote wholeheartedly for a referendum, we could lead the way in Europe, because there are many other countries in Europe who want to renegotiate their position with the European Union as well.
I think it is important to make the point that this is not an issue. This is not just a vote on something which is of importance to the people of the United Kingdom and will be welcomed by the people of the United Kingdom in all regions and parts of the kingdom, but is something that other countries too are looking at for this country to give a lead on. The Foreign Secretary did point out that there have been a number of national plebiscites and votes in relation to European issues in many countries. Sometimes 2 or 3 times on the same issue. But the fact is that people are crying out for a say, and this is the big issue. As the Honourable Member for Stone has said, this is the issue of the day in Europe. political legitimacy, democracy and accountability. I give way to my honourable friend.
And before he moves off the point about the approach by the Labour Party on this issue, would he agree with me that the defence that we cannot have a referendum until there has been substantial change and constitutional change really is a very thin point, given that we've had Maastricht, we have had the Single European Act, we've had the Lisbon Treaty? Surely there's been enough substantial change in our relationship with Europe to give people a say now.
Yes, well, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right on that point, and I have talked on more than one occasion, Madam Deputy Speaker, in this House about the disconnect that now exists between the people and politicians, the political class and Parliament. And people feel their concerns are not being given high enough priority. On the EU, they do feel that promises have been broken. They do believe that for instance, on the Lisbon Treaty, the European Constitution, the Labour Party promised a referendum on that. I remember before a previous election, Tony Blair, with the encouragement of Lord Mandelson, bringing the referendum rabbit out of the hat on that occasion, and then reneging on that pledge when they got into office, claiming then that there were red lines and that they would negotiate these, and therefore it wasn't a constitution anymore, something that people simply don't believe. We have talked about the Lib Dems going back on their promise of an in-out referendum. Reference has been made to the cast iron guarantee that the Prime Minister gave on the Lisbon Treaty. Now, I understand the reasons that have been advanced as to why that didn't happen, that it had already been implemented, but nevertheless, I think many people, and I agree with the honourable member on these benches from Glasgow who spoke, many people believe that if we had wanted to have a referendum on Lisbon, even after it had been introduced, we could have had one, had their political will existed to have one, and it simply didn't exist. That was the problem. I give way.
Except that actually there is fundamental change which is going on already, and it is that fundamental change, even without a treaty, which is the real reason for having a referendum.
Yes, I agree, and that's why it isn't enough simply to have it enshrined in law that there will be a referendum at some future point if there's some new treaty or whatever. There is continuing erosion of sovereignty, and it's therefore important that this matter is brought to a head sooner rather than later. I will give way, and then I'll make some more progress.
Isn't it a fact that any referendum that would be had would be on the treaty change, not on in-out? So therefore, we have never got a promise of an in-out referendum, only a no more change to a particular treaty referendum. And I think we need to make that point very clear. This is our one opportunity.
Very important point, and a very fundamental point, and the reason why this bill is so significant and so important, and why it deserves the widespread support of members in this House. I won't give way any more now, because I want to make progress, conscious of those who wish to speak. So we're here on a Friday, having to go through this process for the reasons that we understand. And one of the reasons that we're here is because the fact that these promises and pledges that have been made in the past by the front benches of the main parties have not been followed through on, and therefore people are looking not just for a promise, not just for a pledge, but they are looking for some kind of guarantee. They are looking for this to be enshrined in legislation. Of course we know that no future Parliament or any successor Parliament can bind this Parliament, but that applies to every aspect of legislation. It applies to every act that's ever passed. But what it will do is it will make it a lot harder, if it is enshrined in legislation, for any incoming Prime Minister of whatever party to actually have, I was going to say the courage, but have the audacity to come before the House and say we are going to repeal the right of the people to have a referendum as passed, hopefully in this Act as a result of this initiative. So I think it is important, and this is a significant piece of legislation, and I think therefore we should proceed. Madam Deputy Speaker, in 1975, 67% of voters in this country chose to remain within a common market, a union which at that time we were told was more about cooperation between European neighbours in terms of trade. But we view today a landscape and an EU treaty that is vast, and an EU that is vastly changed. So much so that, as a senior Labour peer recently noted, the mandate secured by the government in 75 belongs to another time and another generation. And over the past 3 decades, there's been a steady transfer of powers from our sovereign parliament here at Westminster to the corridors and back alleys of Brussels, a process which still continues on a weekly, monthly basis, inexorably and inevitably, in the pursuit of the goal of ever closer political union. And this change isn't something that has been abstract. It isn't something that's detached from the day-to-day realities, I will in a moment, of everyday life. Instead, it is something that has been hard felt by people living in every region of the United Kingdom. I mean, how often do we have businesses and people coming to us complaining about the red tape and regulation that emanates at EU level? How many times do we hear complaints about untrammelled immigration, which is from EU countries, and we no longer have the power to effectively control our own borders, and a number of other policy areas that we could continue to go down to mention. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Very grateful to the Right Honourable Member for giving way. As Chairman of the Northern Ireland Select Committee, can I congratulate the DUP on taking a very clear stance on this issue? He refers to the 1975 referendum. Does he remember that the brochure put out by the then Labour government, Britain's New Deal in Europe, contained the guarantee that the British minister could veto anything that came from Europe at that time? Now, the erosion of that guarantee through qualified majority voting really is what this is all about.
Yes, the honourable gentleman makes a very important point and reminds the House and reminds the public of the sort of pledges and guarantees that have been given in the past, and reminds us again of the reason why we need this bill, to enshrine in law a commitment to giving people their say, because people are fed up with broken promises, and they have found that they cannot trust the political class generally in terms of the pledges in Europe, because once in power, whichever party it is, they become sucked into this ever-increasing desire to have ever closer union, and it is simply unacceptable. Now, I will now conclude my remarks, having said I was going to be brief and not get sidetracked any further. But I want to finish on this point, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the issue of austerity. At a time when the country is facing major cuts, at a time when personal incomes are being affected, household incomes are being affected, it is absolutely scandalous that the UK will have contributed £29 billion between 2007 and 2013 on EU structural funds, and received back for spending in this country £8.7 billion. Now, that is simply unacceptable. It's damaging to communities and households right across this United Kingdom. There was some hope that the negotiations for the 2014-2020 multi-annual framework would witness a sea change in EU spending, and I do congratulate the Prime Minister on what he managed to do. Yet, despite an agreement by the Council to reduce the budget, the trend of waste and inefficiency will continue. The unaccountable EU civil service spending on it will rise by 2%. It's already an organisation that employs 3,000 unelected officials on salaries of over €150,000 and gold-plated pensions. The European External Action Service, which the Minister told us a year or two ago wouldn't cost us anything more, it would be neutral in terms of expenditure. It's in line to receive a spending increase of over 3% for its role in undermining the foreign policy of countries across Europe. And the EU's 56 quangos will receive an increase of 4% under the new budget. And that's not to mention specific examples like the House of European History. Believe it or not, those of you who haven't heard about it, it's going to cost £136 million. British taxpayers are contributing £18 million to this project. And also the European Parliament, which continues to split its activities over 3 locations, something which this party in the European Parliament is deeply opposed to and is fighting to change, costing €1 billion to have 2 places for the seat of the European Parliament, Brussels and Strasbourg, over the next 7 years. That is why, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is essential that the people have their say on this issue. These are examples of why the waste and the inefficiency needs to be exposed. But the fundamental point is this, that on these issues, whether it's expenditure or setting the policy on agriculture or setting the policy on foreign affairs or whatever it is, fundamentally it should be for the British people through their elected members in this House to decide the policy for the United Kingdom. It is not for these unelected people in Brussels to forge on the people of the United Kingdom an ever closer political union that they don't want. And I believe that this House is failing in its duty if we don't respond to the supporters in all of our parties who want a say, who want a voice and who want a vote. And I commend the member in bringing this bill and urge all honourable members, right honourable members, to support it in the division later.
Order.